What you are about to see didn't just shake Ellen DeGeneres' career, it shifted how Hollywood sees itself. But the most surprising moment wasn't what she said to the actor who plays Jesus on television. It was what he quietly said back to her that made her freeze up on live television and sent ripples across every major media outlet. 43 seconds of footage that 3 big studios tried to hide, but it leaked anyway. Ellen DeGeneres, a woman who built her fame by breaking people down with a smile, leaned forward with that same grin, thinking she was about to land the final blow. Jonathan, let's be honest, you are just an actor dressed up as God. Do you not think it is time to stop misleading people and admit this has always been about money? The audience held its breath. But Jonathan Roumie didn't argue, he didn't defend himself. Instead, he smiled with the kind of calm that comes from knowing something no one else in the room understands. And then, he said 7 words that would stay with Ellen for the rest of her life. 7 words that made her realize she had crossed the line with the wrong person, on the wrong day. 7 words that turned an interview into the most viewed spiritual moment in modern television. The cameras kept running, but what followed was so intense, so completely unexpected, that by the time the episode ended, Ellen was not the same person who had first stepped on that stage, and neither was anyone who had witnessed what happened. This was not just a talk show that went off script. It was the story of how one man's unshakable belief exposed the emptiness behind an entire industry, and it all began 3 days earlier, in a place where broken dreams sometimes lead to hope. 3 days before Ellen's world started falling apart, Jonathan Roumie was kneeling on the wooden floor of his apartment in Chicago. It was 4:47 in the morning. He was praying the same prayer he had whispered every day since childhood, but this wasn't some luxury home of a celebrity. The apartment was almost bare, just a wooden crucifix his Lebanese grandmother had made and an old photo of his father, who had died thinking Jonathan would never succeed. The space smelled like black coffee and old pages. It was the kind of place where someone goes to remember who they are. Once the cameras turn off, his phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Ellen wants you on the show Thursday. It's called Hollywood's Holy Hypocrites. They plan to call out faith-based films as just moneymakers. Interested? Jonathan stared at the message, then looked at the cross. He had been waiting for this chance, though he didn't know it until now. Not the chance to be on TV, but the chance to decide between comfort and truth, to choose between staying silent or speaking up for the God who had brought him back from a darkness so deep that not even his closest friends knew how far he had fallen. He replied with one word, yes. But what Ellen's producers and all of Hollywood did not know was that Jonathan had received a phone call the night before that interview. It came from a hospital in Memphis. A young girl, very sick, had watched The Chosen 17 times. She asked to speak with the man who played Jesus, just to tell him that she wasn't scared anymore. That phone call lasted for 3 hours. The girl had questions. She asked if heaven was real, if Jesus truly loved people who were broken, if God still did miracles. And Jonathan made her a promise, one that could make him look foolish on national television or prove that faith is more than something you pretend to have for a role. He promised her that if the world ever tried to tear down what they believed, he would not let them do it quietly. The morning of the show, Jonathan skipped breakfast. He didn't practice any answers or rehearse sound bites. He simply sat quietly, holding the crucifix in his hands, and made a choice that would cost him a lot in the eyes of Hollywood but give him something much more valuable. He decided that if Ellen wanted to mock God on her show, she would have to go through someone who had already felt what it meant to be lost, and wasn't afraid to face it again for the truth. When Jonathan Roumie stepped onto Ellen's stage that Thursday, something shifted. Even the camera crew, people used to seeing every kind of guest, felt it in the air. He wasn't dressed in high-end clothes or trying to impress. He wore his father's old navy blazer, the one with a small tear in the left elbow. He stood and walked with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Ellen began the show with her familiar smile, the same one that had built many careers, and ended just as many. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "the man who's convinced millions of Christians he is Jesus Christ, Jonathan Roumie." The audience clapped, but the applause was awkward, uncertain, like people unsure if they should be laughing or listening. Jonathan sat down without waving or putting on a show. He just gave a polite nod and said, "Thank you for having me, Ellen. I know this won't be easy." That's when Ellen showed her real intent. She leaned forward, confident, like someone who had waited a long time for this moment. "Jonathan, let's skip the Hollywood politeness. You've made millions pretending to be the Son of God. Do you not think that's a little blasphemous?" Her words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. The audience shifted in their seats, uneasy. This wasn't the light, friendly interview they were used to. Jonathan looked at her quietly. Then he looked at the crowd, then back to her. And, in a low voice, one so soft the audio crew had to lean in, he replied, "Ellen, I've never claimed to be the Son of God. I've only said that he changed my life. And if that makes you uncomfortable, maybe we should ask why." Ellen's smile twitched for just a moment. The camera caught it. She quickly laughed, trying to make Jonathan's response seem silly. "Come on, Jonathan. You seriously believe in talking snakes and people walking on water in 2024? The audience laughed. But it felt uneasy now, like they were reacting because they were expected to, not because they understood the joke. Jonathan didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. He just looked at her, and what he did next chilled her. He gave her the same expression his character had when forgiving the men who nailed him to a cross. Then he said, "Ellen, I believe in a God who turned water into wine, healed blind people, and raised the dead. But even more than that, I believe in a God who took a broken, addicted, suicidal actor from New York and turned him into someone worth loving." Then he paused. If you think that's harder to believe than water into wine, then maybe you've never truly seen what rock bottom looks like. The room went silent. Ellen's planned questions suddenly felt small. She had brought a butter knife to a sword fight. She tried to push back, but the feeling in the room had changed. Something real was happening. Sensing she was losing control, Ellen leaned back with confidence, pretending to still have the upper hand. "Okay, Jonathan, let's talk about money. The Chosen has made more than $400 million. Your net worth has exploded. You live in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills now, right? It's funny how God always seems to bless people right when they become profitable." Some in the audience nodded. The trap had been set. Many had fallen into it before. But Jonathan didn't step into it. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small and folded. Ellen narrowed her eyes. "This is my bank statement from last month," he said as he unfolded it. "You can ask my accountant after the show if you want to check it." He held it toward the camera. People gasped. It showed a balance of $1,247.47. "I give away everything except what I need to live. I always have," Jonathan said. "The mansion you mentioned, I've never been there. I live in the same apartment I've had for 8 years. I drive a 2003 Honda Civic with 240,000 miles on it. Same car I had when I was struggling. I keep it because I never want to forget where I came from." Ellen's face turned pale. None of this was in her prep notes. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She flipped through her cards, desperate to regain control. "Surely," she said nervously, "this is just part of your image. No one in Hollywood really lives like that. You're pretending to be poor to look holy." That was when Jonathan did something no one would forget. Jonathan stood up slowly, walked to Ellen's desk, and placed the paper right in front of her. Then he looked directly into the camera and said something that would go viral within minutes and end Ellen's career. 3 months ago, a little girl named Sarah from Memphis called me. She's 8 years old and has cancer. She asked if Jesus really loves broken people, because that's how she feels broken. I told her yes, and I made her a promise. His voice got stronger. I promised her that if anyone ever said her faith was fake or her prayers were useless, I would speak up, even if it cost me everything. The camera zoomed in on Ellen. For the first time in her career, she looked genuinely shaken. "Sarah is watching this from her hospital bed right now," Jonathan continued. "And Ellen, you just called her faith a scam. You told a dying child that the God she prays to every night is part of a business plan." People in the audience were shifting. Some looked angry. Others were crying. Ellen tried to say something, but the words did not come. Jonathan kept going, his tone clear and steady. "So here is what I want you to do, Ellen. Look into that camera and tell Sarah that Jesus does not love her. Tell her that her prayers are just make-believe, that her hope is useless." Silence filled the room. Ellen's hands were shaking now. Her usual confidence had completely vanished. And that was when Jonathan said the words that changed everything. "If you cannot say that to a dying child, then maybe you should ask yourself why you were comfortable saying it to me. If you are still watching this moment that changed television, and you believe that truth should be spoken even when it costs something, then like this video and write the word courage in the comments. Let's see how many still believe that faith is stronger than fame." Elon's voice cracked as she tried to fight back. "You're being manipulative. You're using a sick child to make me look bad. That's not faith, Jonathan. That's emotional pressure." The audience gasped, but Jonathan reached for his phone. He lifted it to the microphone and said, "Sarah, are you watching?" A soft voice answered, clear and small. "Yes, Mr. Jonathan, I'm watching. Mommy's crying." The studio froze. This wasn't part of the show. Jonathan smiled gently. "Do you remember what we talked about, sweetheart? How Jesus loves you, exactly as you are." "Yes," she said, "even when I'm sick and lost my hair. Especially then," he replied, his voice breaking. "And remember, even when people do not understand your faith, that does not make it less real." "You told me," Sarah said gently, "that even adults forget sometimes that God loves them too." Ellen sat frozen in her chair, watching her career fall apart in real time. Millions were hearing this conversation live. The little girl's voice became stronger. "Mr. Jonathan, can you tell the lady on TV something for me?" Ellen's hands trembled. "Tell her I pray for her too," Sarah said. "Because Jesus told us to pray for people who are mean to us. And I think maybe she's just scared, like I was. Tell her that even if she doesn't believe in Jesus, he still believes in her." The studio fell completely quiet. It was not awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that feels sacred. Ellen's carefully built image cracked completely. Tears ran down her face. She sobbed openly right there on live television. Sarah, Jonathan said softly, you just touched more hearts in 30 seconds than most people do in a lifetime. I love you, Mr. Jonathan, she replied. Tell everyone I said hi. He hung up and turned back to Ellen, who now looked broken in a way that was not rehearsed or controlled. Ellen, he said gently, that little girl just showed you more grace than you have shown toward God during this entire interview. She is dying, but she is not bitter. She is praying for you. The cameras captured an audience filled with tears. Strangers were holding hands. No one moved. They had all just witnessed something they could not explain. Ellen could not stop crying. The most powerful woman in daytime television sat in her chair, undone, her makeup running down her face. Over 20 million people were watching it all happen live. Her producers were yelling into her earpiece to cut to a commercial, but she pulled it out and dropped it to the floor. When she finally looked up, her voice was nearly gone. I don't know how to stop. Jonathan leaned closer, speaking with the care of someone who had once been in that exact place. Stop what, Ellen? Stop pretending. Stop hiding. Stop being angry at a God you are not even sure is real. Her voice cracked again. I've spent 20 years making people laugh because I was afraid they would see how broken I really am. The words hit the room like a shockwave. This was not the Ellen people had known. This was someone who had been performing for years. Finally admitting she was exhausted. Ellen, Jonathan said gently. What if I told you the God you are angry at is the same one who has been holding you together all this time, even when you didn't know it? She looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. How can you be so sure? She asked. How do you have so much faith when there is so much pain in the world? Jonathan stayed quiet for a long time. Then, without saying a word, he rolled up his sleeves. The camera zoomed in on his arms, revealing deep scars running along both forearms. The audience gasped. Because Ellen, he said softly, 8 years ago, I was exactly where you are right now. I was successful, I was known, but I was completely empty inside. He paused. These scars there from the night I tried to end my life. I was in a hotel bathtub in Vancouver, bleeding, convinced that no one could ever truly love the mess I had become. I was tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of hurting. The room was silent again. But then, in that bathroom, something happened. Jonathan continued. I heard a voice, just as clear as I hear yours now. It said, I have plans for you, plans to give you hope and a future. He paused again. I thought maybe I was imagining it because of the blood loss, but the paramedics found me in time. And when I woke up in the hospital, there was a Bible on my nightstand. No one could explain how it got there. Ellen had stopped crying. Now she was just listening, completely still, like someone hearing their own life described by someone else. I opened the Bible, Jonathan said, and the first words I read were, Come to me, all you who are tired and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. He looked directly at Ellen. I had been tired my whole life, but in that moment, I knew I was not alone anymore. Then he added, the same God who met me in that hotel room is here right now, with you, waiting for you to stop running. Ellen's voice was barely above a whisper. What if I am too damaged? What if I have gone too far? Jonathan smiled through his tears. Ellen, the God I know, is an expert at using broken things. He took a man ready to give up on life and gave him the role of his son. Just imagine what he could do with a woman who spent her life making people laugh. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of something different, like hope, redemption, and maybe even the chance for something new, something better. And then Ellen did something no one expected. She stood up, walked slowly around her desk, and knelt beside Jonathan's chair. On live television, in front of over 20 million people, Ellen DeGeneres asked a question that would change the rest of her life. Will you teach me how to pray? What followed became the most watched moment in television history. Jonathan reached down, took Ellen's hands, and began to pronote a rehearsed speech, not something for cameras, but a real, honest prayer from one hurting soul to another. God, he whispered, Ellen is here. She is tired of pretending. She is tired of hiding. Show her what you showed me, that she is loved exactly as she is. Ellen's sobs filled the studio. 20 million people watched in silence as something real happened in front of them. Raw faith. Not for show, but from the heart. When the prayer ended, Ellen stayed on her knees. She looked up with wide eyes, like someone seeing light for the first time. I felt something, she whispered. I actually felt something. The show didn't end with music or jokes or dancing. There was no goodbye, just Ellen sitting on the studio floor, holding Jonathan's hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Within hours, the clip had 500 million views, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. 3 days later, Ellen stepped away from her show. In a simple video, she said, I've spent my life making people laugh, but Jonathan showed me something more powerful. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let people see you cry. She left television, but not life. Months passed. Quiet stories began to spread. Ellen at children's hospitals. Ellen at shelters. Ellen sitting with people who were hurting. No cameras, no posts, just being there. A woman learning to care without performing. 6 months later, a short video was posted online. No network would air it. It showed Ellen and Jonathan at a hospital in Memphis, reading to sick children. At the end, a small girl with no hair looked into the camera and smiled. "Hi everyone, it's Sarah. I'm still here, and I'm still praying for all of you. Doctors called it impossible. She was in remission." Sarah just smiled and said, "I told you. Jesus loves broken people most." That interview did more than break the internet. It broke something deeper, something fake. It broke the wall between image and truth, between fame and real faith. In that space, millions found permission to stop pretending. And finally, be honest. If this story touched something in you, share it. Not for likes, not for numbers, but for the one person watching in silence, wondering if it is still okay to believe in a world that forgot how to pray.